Okay.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our wonderful program, Nature in Winter. We're delighted to see you all. Our program this morning will be presented by Dawn, affectionately known as Dawn the Farmer. Dawn was the farmer at Sophia Garden for many, many years. And over those years, he not only worked the land for us, but every now and then he would do programs for us. And we were always very, very impressed with his wisdom. So we thought that we would ask him today to share with us a little bit about nature in winter, what's happening beneath the soil, um, and also what lessons it might hold for us. So, Dawn, it's up to you. It's all for you now. Okay?
Sure. And I just want to say that I'll be talking, but I don't want to be lecturing. So if people, wish to, comment or have something to add, feel free to, and I'll get started. So I'm going to start by saying it's been a very, very cold winter this winter. This is really, I have not, it's been a while since there's been a winter like this on Long Island, where
Yes.
we've had consistent temperatures at night below 20 and into the teens. It's interesting. At one point during a few weeks ago, when it was really, really cold, it reminded me of New Hampshire. I felt like I was in New Hampshire again. I had lived in New Hampshire for about 10 years, and it can get quite cold up there. And it was really, really cold. So anyway, I'll start out by saying, for me, the winter has always been a time of reflection, and looking inward and sort of not being so concerned about all the craziness of life. Although these days it's, as you well know, it's very, very crazy with what's going on in the world. But it's always been that for me, at least, to be a time where I sort of try to look inward and think more about where my life is at, and what am I here to do. One night recently, part of what I do at the Mother House these days is I work with maintenance, and I'm part of the group that goes out during the snowstorms. And recently, the snowstorms have been in the late evening and early morning. And there was one night, probably 2 weeks ago, and I was outside and it was snowing and it was so quiet, and it was so it was the sky was so clear, you could see the stars, and I was just in awe of what what I saw. And I think sometimes, at least I do. I mean, I go through my life and I'm just thinking, I have to do this and I have to do that, and I need to have this obligation. And I just don't stop and think about, the world around me. And I just, so that experience of being out there when it's so cold and so quiet and so dark, um, that really, it causes me to think more, about, what about my life. Um, so I'll return to this, but getting to, back to nature, although what I talked about was nature. I mean, we're talking about the weather. Um, what I have observed at my life on the farm, and then also when I lived up in northern New England, was how different, how nature reacts with or reacts to winter. Um, so of course, we have shorter days. It gets darker earlier, um, and we have if you look at the animals, um, we see birds um, that stay, but many of the birds migrate, and so that sort of contributes to the quiet of winter. At the around us, and especially over at on the property of the sisters. Um, so many of the songbirds have gone, but there are some birds still around, The geese are around, as anybody who lives at the mother house knows.
Yeah.
They are ever present, but most of the other birds have gone, and and part of that is just the natural cycle of life, which is they're here for a certain period of time, and then they move on. And I think that's another thing that we can think about with our lives is, are we always wedded to the same place? I mean, do we need to be, moving around to see things new? I know I get into a rut sometimes where I'm just sort of staying here and in the greater Babylon area. And but then I find when I go beyond that, if I go up to Connecticut or if I go out east, it's a completely it's a different world. And it's a bit of a different world. And so for me, it just gets me out and gets me thinking more about that there is more to the world just beyond my little my little world that I have here. Um, but getting back to the animals, I mean, so we have the birds, and the birds migrate, and there are some that stay. The ones that are staying are, trying to find food. So that's, something that, that winter, for them, trying to figure out how to survive. But also for them, it's, and this is for the other animals too. It's part of the cycle of their lives where they're, whether they're, so just to talk about, say, for instance, the turtles that live in the cloister garden. What they do is they're going through a cycle where they may be something they're hibernating, or it's not really not hibernating for turtles, and say lizards. It's called brumating, where they're in a state of torpor and decreased activity. Their metabolisms aren't running as high as they would during the warmer seasons. So they're in this season. They're in this state of resting, regenerating, and getting ready for the spring. To renew, to sort of not be reborn, but to start life anew in the season. And I think that's something else that we can look at. When we're looking at as ourselves and lessons about winter, is that when we look at animals that hibernate or brumate, how they deal with the weather, and but how they sort of go into a stasis, and then they get ready to begin life anew once the spring comes. And then the other animals that you see around, at least in my experience at the farm, I see squirrels and rabbits and foxes, and all of these animals, they're sort of, I wouldn't say struggling to survive, but they're it's harder for them to survive. There's less food than there is during the height of the summer, or in the spring, or in the fall, but yet they survive. And so they're maybe conserving energy, and spending a lot of time looking for food. And so that's something else that I think about, where we as a society have so much, and yet some of us do have to spend more energy trying to secure basic needs. But that's something that we think that there are times when we do need to consider that, and think about maybe how we can, if we are concerned about it, how we can aid others who may be in need. So I'm sorry. Did anybody want to say anything? I'm sorry. Okay, I thought I heard something. And then the other thing with animals is, of course, this is a time when they're getting ready to bring new life into the world. I always loved the spring, because I get to see, when I was at the farm, I would get to see young rabbits, young squirrels, young birds. And the other thing, that getting back to animals and winter, with the snow, the other thing is, with the snow, I find that when I sometimes would go to the farm, I would find all these tracks of animals, and there were things going on evidently at the farm that, when I wasn't there, that I just was, I was sort of oblivious to. But when then I looked at the prints on the ground, I was just amazed at the activity that was going on there. And so I think that's another thing for us, as far as the winter, and it could be any season really, but to be more aware of what's going on around us. That there is more to us, I mean, more to life than just what our lives are. Um, and how do we just ignore that? Do we celebrate it? But just to be aware of it, I think, is brings us to more of an awareness of the wider world around us. Um, one of the things I've been very concerned with recently is, how we are very inward looking, and people are just sort of concerned about themselves and, what they care about or those around them, and not really, thinking about the larger world or, their fellow human beings. And I really, um, yeah, I really wish that wasn't the case, but it just seems to be more and more like that. So, but anyway, getting back to the winter. So the other thing is, just looking at, lessons. I mean, one of the things with animals is they, some of them, like I did mention, they migrate. And some of us do migrate too. I know there are people that, people that are snowbirds and they go down to Florida or the Carolinas for the winter. And I don't do that. I love the winter, but I can understand why some people would. So I think for some people they like to do that. And it also gives them a change of scenery, and so they go to see different worlds and see different people. Um, Another thing, looking at the animals that are remain, I mean, what they're eating is what's available, what's available in the season, or what's out, what remains. So with rabbits, they're eating the old grass, or they're eating the bark of trees, or they're eating twigs. They may be eating some of the stuff that's of new growth that's growing, as from plants as they sort of transition to from winter to spring. Um, but I think that the lesson there for me is that um, maybe I need to be eating things in season. And actually, I really got that when I really started farming, where became to understand that there are seasons, and there are different things that grow in different seasons. And so therefore, things that, like for instance, tomatoes in January, that's not, I wouldn't say not natural, but it's not, if we were living in a world that we weren't controlling nature, we would only have tomatoes in the summertime and in the fall. Um, so for me, it's looking at the animals in winter. I'm thinking, okay, I need to be eating those things um, that that are in season, or that were stored over from the fall, and they taste better. I recently bought some strawberries that were brought up from Florida, and they really didn't taste like anything.
Mm.
Um, so that's something, at least for me, that I try to keep in mind. Um, and then the other thing I think with winter is, for me, I see a lot of people trying to work against a nature, trying to control it. And I can understand why, why people do that. Um, but I think it's, at least for the here for us up here in the northern part of the world, um, it's something I think to keep in mind, that we aren't always in control of nature. We seem to think we are, but at times, as we've seen with the wildfires, um, and with other natural catastrophes that have happened, that we really can't control nature. Then we can, we really have to be cognizant of that. Um, and I think if we think that we can, and we become so um, we become so set in the way that we're going to be able to control things, that I think that people, really, I think it leads to people being affected um, greatly when they realize that they really weren't as protected as they were. Um, so that's my bit on the animals. Now I'll go to the plants, which I have a much better understanding of. In the winter, winter is very important for growing certain for growing certain plants and trees around the world. Um, so when, of course, when winter comes, many plants die off, or go into a dormant state, or in the case of trees, they lose their leaves, um, sap runs. Um, but when we get to growing things, there are plants that need to go through a series of not a series. They need to go through a cold stretch in order to be able to germinate. And this is a process called stratification. It happens naturally in nature, and sometimes if you're growing perennials, especially, you have to do that. You have to mimic nature, and so what you do is you either freeze or you refrigerate seeds before you plant them, and then they grow. And so it's a process that is needed. So when I think about that, and I think about life, I think sometimes, we sort of rush ahead, and we don't really think, that we need to, say, think more about, what it is we're going to be doing. And so taking a period of a time where you sort of, let things, think about things, and wait before you act. I think, at least for me, I've tried to do that because I know that, and I've seen other people do it, and I've done it myself, where you act so, you just act immediately. You don't sit and think about it, and you go over in your mind what what things can be done, or what you're thinking about doing. So to me, that's sort of like with the thing with the seeds, is that these seeds that you need to stratify, to use, cold, to get them to germinate, is to let the seed go through a period of time where it is, um, it is getting ready. It is waiting to the right time, and then once the time is right, when things warm up, then it germinates. Um, and also with plants, it's fascinating, with the cold, that, and this goes to the waiting part, where things are like bulbs are waiting to emerge. We have plants that are growing, that grow, and they're only there for a period of time, for a short season. Tulips and such, and that's another, at least in my mind, looking at it and comparing, looking at life, is that it takes time. It's not going to happen immediately. It happens when it's supposed to happen. When nature says, when the weather says it's going to happen, or the time of the year. And then the same thing with perennials. We have plants and bushes and such that, once the winter comes, they lose their leaves, and then, or they may not lose their leaves. Especially if you look at perennials that are used in say, rosemary or sage, they'll keep the leaves, but then will sort of rejuvenate, come the spring. And that's, once again, I think it's something to keep in mind, this whole idea of waiting until it is to be. So that's, once again, it goes back to what I'm talking about with patience, and thinking and waiting, and ruminating on things. And then the other thing I'll say about winter is, I find it fascinating, and I'm not a theologian, but at least in the northern hemisphere, that that winter here is, it's sort of bookended by two church seasons that are periods of waiting. You have Advent, um, which begins usually late November, early December. So that's a period of waiting. And then, so on the other end of winter, we have Lent, which in some ways is a period of waiting, um, waiting for waiting for or going on the journey to the crucifixion and the resurrection. So I think about that too. as I'm thinking about, my life and, how winter, affects it. And so I'll end there and open it up for discussion.
I want to add that during winter, our um, our wildlife neighbors, such as some things that we normally don't like to have, or like the pest, they're also dormant. They're hiding in the leaves. I don't know how it is in the compound where you guys live, but at St. Joseph, we, especially in the area of garden ministry, we try not to blow leaves and destroy all those leaves because there are many pollinators and other insects that are hibernating during the winter time, and we won't clear that until the temperature is warm enough to we can't keep all the leaves, obviously, and then we process them as compost in our compound.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something else. Yes, there are the animals that we like, and then there are the ones the creatures that we don't like. And yes, I was just the last night when I was at the mother house, the exterminator came by, and we were talking about um, if he was asking me, were there any issues that I knew of at the mother house these days? And I said to him, well, it's still kind of cold, so we really don't have the issues that we've had in the past, which have been yellow jackets and ladybugs. Even though ladybugs aren't a pest, they do sometimes get into the building, and there is some concern. So yeah, I mean that's another thing where it is a time where these forms of life are dormant, and then burst forth, and and then we deal with them.
Yeah.
Judy?
Yeah, I just want to add that looks like ladybugs. Those are the Asian lady beetles, and they look very similar, although the number of dots
Mm-hmm.
on their backs are more numerous than the our native ladybugs. They're predatory to our native ladybugs, and our native ladybugs do not go in to hibernate or hang out during wintertime in the house. So um, I don't like to kill, but sometimes in the ecological balance of things, we need to be mindful of what we let go and what we need to curb or maintain to have a thriving, especially native flora and fauna in our environment, because it's very tough when the quote invasive species, just like the spotted lanternfly. I mean,
Mhm.
I don't know how much of a problem it is in the mother house area, but we have our tree of heaven, um, and their eggs are not just in the tree of heaven. It's everywhere on the wall, on areas that we don't normally associate with a place that's hospitable for the emergence once they hatch in the spring.
I think
Irene?
Irene wants to ask something. Irene, I see you.
I'd like to comment. We had those spotted lantern flies come toward the end of the summer. Oh my gosh, they were coming in droves, and we were told, you have to kill them because they're going to kill the trees. They're going to lay their eggs and their larvae, and there's going to be, they'll multiply like crazy, and they're going to eventually be the demise of many of our trees. So, um, and they're so big, and it's difficult to kill them. I had to buy bug spray all around the cottage, around the apartments. That's basically where I am. I wasn't really around the other parts of the mother house grounds, but upon around the apartments and around the cottage. Oh my gosh, they were all over. And I would see one and kill it and say, oh, thank God, that one's gone. And then all of a sudden there was another one and another one. And it is that it could be a plight because they really just started coming last, maybe late spring or summer. And by the time they hit around here, it was it was scary. And
Mm.
so that is something that we really, I don't know. I asked Joe, our head of maintenance, what can we do? And he just laughed. He said, kill as many as you can because they're invasive and they're deadly, unfortunately. We know God made them. Why? We don't know. But they're created by God. But sorry, God, we have to get rid of them. We have to kill them.
Because they hitch a ride. They can lay their eggs on those shipping pallets,
Mm.
and they went across. Because they're originally in their country of origin. Somewhere in Asia, China, all the way to the Southeast Asia, and they hitch a ride, and it starts to proliferate. And unfortunately, the fortunate thing, having working with many of the farmers at the St. Joseph Brentwood compound, they don't seem to really attack the crops,
No.
except for the grapes. I mean, we don't have a vineyard, but they hang out more in areas where grapevines grew. So the major concern um, among the people in our part of the world, basically, the threat to the vineyards, because they can decimate the crops.
Accused the documentary of containing many inaccuracies,
Somebody has a radio on.
and
You want to mute yourself if you have the radio on?
here the documentary
Thank you. Don, I wanted to ask you, as long as we have a lull here.
Yeah,
I
sure.
want to ask you two questions. You distinguished hibernating from another word.
Brewmating.
What was the word?
Brewmating.
Brewmating?
Yeah, BRUMATED.
Yeah, and what's the difference? It's just a milder form of hibernation, or?
Well, they're not sleeping. So, when a bear hibernates, it's sleeping. Other animals hibernate, sleeping. With turtles, like I said, it's like a state of, as I've read, torpor. So I guess decreased activity, and their metabolism slowed down. And so they bury them. I know they in the cloister garden they bury themselves, and so the metabolism slows down. So this way they're not burning as many calories. So the the calories that they're burning are reduced, and they're able to survive through the winter, and then emerge in the spring. I'm sure very, very hungry, and raring to go. So yes, I did not know that. Like I said, in preparation for this, I just was curious. Do turtles hibernate? And they say yes, it's hibernation, but it's a special hibernation, which is called brumation.
Okay. And I was just reflecting as you were talking about this whole new field of biomimicry. Could you say something about that a little bit?
Remind me where I talked about biomimicry.
Well, you didn't mention it. I mean,
Yeah,
when
I'm just saying, but what
yeah,
and
well, as I understand it, it's um, um, it's trying to mimic nature.
oh, okay, yeah, the stratification with the seeds, yeah,
Yeah, and um, to learn from the wisdom of nature. Like one of the things is, you know, eliminating waste and coming to use waste as part of the whole cycle, you know.
right.
So it's just, it strikes me as the wisdom in nature and how we can learn it and use it to solve problems rather than work against it. I don't know. That's how I think about it. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I mean, that's yeah, that was I think at the point I was trying to make with the stratification is that you're mimicking your nature,
Hmm.
um, and yeah, I mean, I think what you know, and also what you're talking about too, you know, when we're looking at what we do with our waste. Um, uh, I know what we can do with organic waste. Of course, composting. Um, but be frank with you, working at the mother house, I am amazed at how much plastic we use.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a lot of plastic. I'm just, yeah, uh, yeah, and I just think about what's going to happen to all this plastic. And I know it's happening. We know it's happening with plastic. It takes a long, long time to break down. When it does break down, it becomes little particles. It's practically in everything, in the soil, in our bodies, in our food. These microplastic particles. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think that's going to be if the big thing for the future is try to figure out how do we deal with all this plastic, and how do we break it down so that it's not going to be harmful to us and to the world, to nature. Um, but yes, I mean, and I think that was I know with if you look at some cultures, especially ones that um, not necessarily Western. There are ways that they have because of where they are, whether it be in the Americas or in Africa or in Asia, or the North, the northern the northern Arctic areas. They come up with ways to survive and to you know deal with trying to do things that are not going to trying to work with nature to solve whatever problems they have or issues they have. Whereas I think with us in the West, because of our history and our way of thinking, we seek to conquer nature
Mm.
and subjugate it as opposed to work with it. And that can work on some level, but I think the problem there is that eventually, as I talked about with the natural disasters, and that we really do not control nature. We cannot. We may think we can, but the reality is that we eventually we will not win that. If we're trying to battle with nature, we're not going to win that fight.
Because nature is God. You can't, Mother Nature, it's another name for God. And we can't, we can't control God. I would just like to comment on the daffodils. I have daffodils that are about 2 inches high already.
Mm-hmm.
Don, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. The ground is frozen solid. It's been so cold, and yet there are daffodils coming up around the cottage that are about 2 inches high. There's, as you were talking about, um, the life continues, life goes on, life is forever in motion, whether we see it or not. And the same with us, our life in the freezing cold. We're ever in motion. And the daffodils around the cottage are at least 2 inches high. And I say, how do they grow? How do they move in that cold weather? And even if we have another spell of, 3 weeks of ice, they'll come up eventually. April, May, June, eventually they will. They don't die off. It's amazing. And so do we. We keep growing too.
I see an example of that. I like to do winter seed sowing where you're using like a plastic jug. It's like little mini greenhouse. You plant the seeds, you can throw them out in the winter time.
Hmm.
And of course, in January and February, even March, they're not really growing. And suddenly the seeds decide, okay, it's time. And they start to sprout. It's just amazing to watch.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
Do you think that winter sowing is an activity that's against nature, Don? You think?
I'm sorry, I missed what you
Okay.
said.
Do you think that winter sowing is an activity that is like not working with nature or against nature because we're kind of like forcing it early?
No, I don't think we're forcing it early because it's outside. So
Right.
it's instead of really, how you people go to the nursery and buy the little seedlings in the spring. These usually come up about the same time,
Hmm.
but in my estimation, they're much stronger because I think they've been used to the outdoor
Element.
environment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think with that, I know, going back to sunflowers, we grew a lot of sunflowers at the farm, and inevitably sunflower seeds would get spread around. And they would end up popping up in places that we didn't know how they got there. But what I was always amazed that they could survive the winter. They would survive the winter, the seeds. So the seeds would be, dispersed from whenever way, a squirrel taking the seed head and or the flower head and dragging it across the property, and the seeds dropping off, and the seeds would survive the winter, and then all of a sudden, once the ground temperature reached a certain level, they would just explode. So the point is, whether it's you're forcing it with what's been talked about is, if you're doing that and then you're putting them out, they'll grow when they're ready to. So I don't see that in contradicting nature. Having said that, I mean, I don't see anything wrong with people growing stuff in greenhouses during the winter. That happens. Yes, I think, on some level, I'm not, I don't agree with it, but on the other level, I know that we need food. So, I'm not going to, be such a zealot and say, oh, we shouldn't be doing this, and people should not have access to food. So, but anyway, I'll end it there.
Yeah, well, that's a whole big debate, I mean, you could blow it out way beyond seeds. Like,
Mhm.
How much as humans can we work with nature to create the new,
Mhm.
and when is that a violation?
Right.
Like when do you, like a genetic modification, and all of that. There's so many questions in all of that, when you think medical research, the things that they've been able to do, that they can do now, years ago that they couldn't do. It's because we were working with nature, hopefully in the best way. But what are the boundaries? And, now with AI, I mean, where is all that going? It's a lot to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, eating seasonally and eating locally definitely is or the responsible thing to do.
Mhm.
Although no matter what we do, I think we won't grow enough bananas, for example, to in the United States to meet the consumption level. But there are many other things. For example, I just resist buying blueberries. No matter how much I like blueberries, I resist buying fresh blueberries in the winter because they have to be flown in from Peru, Chile, and all that places. And I think it would be a responsible thing, no matter how small it may seem, to reduce our consumption based on seasonal things. Not eliminate, but reduce. I don't think we can eliminate that need. So yeah, and plastic packaging is definitely a problem. And so we just need to be mindful. There is no simple solution right now to plastic containers. Just not a simple solution. We can probably say, oh, let's not use plastic spoons, because the recycling people don't even take them, right? So it has to end up in the garbage, in the landfill. So there are certain things that we can do on a daily basis. It may seem small, but if we all think the same way that I'm only one person and I don't care, let's just trash them. If everyone thinks the same way, we have a bigger problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's it, because we are all so different. So different. And that's part of the problem. But also, talking about the blueberries, I understand what you're saying, but then you read in nutritional papers that blueberries are an excellent food for you. So here you are, torn between, and how many, torn between buying them because they have to be flown in, or eating them. But how many other foods also are flown in? Probably bananas, and they're high in potassium. And we're told, oh, bananas are very good for you. Well, they all have to be flown in. I don't know where bananas grow in the United States.
Some in Florida and some in Southern California, but I think those are for local consumption. I don't think they're distributed in to other states. I don't think there's in a large enough farm for those. And all the bananas that we eat here in the United States, those are all GMOs, all genetically modified because of disease and fungal resistant type that they have to modify. In Asia and in the Caribbean, there are a lot more varieties of bananas. I was born and raised in Indonesia, and the first time I tasted banana in the United States, I was like blown away at the tastelessness of the bananas.
Wow.
It's so different because at that time, we didn't have any banana variety that's the same as the ones that are sold in the United States.
Mhm. It might be like a ripe tomato in the summer that we have grown, and then the light, the dull pale red tomatoes that we buy in the supermarket in the winter, and they are tasteless.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Well,
So does anybody have anything else that they want to offer? We're kind of spreading out our discussion here, which is great because so much is food, and the consumption of food is such a huge issue. The growing, how we grow it, how we eat it, how we package it, how we ship it, all huge areas of concern at this point in time, we know. So it's not surprising that we kind of migrated out into these other areas, you know? I'm sitting here thinking of, I had the blessing of studying with Elizabeth Johnson, the theologian Elizabeth Johnson, and she said to us at one point, eat a banana and participate in the sin of the world.
Oh,
I'm thinking about that now as we're talking.
I don't think I'll eat bananas.
Oh, yeah. If you watch the documentary of, the entire process of banana growing and all that, yes, that's a very true statement.
Yeah. So does anybody have anything else they want to add?
Well, when
Denise, I see you want to talk, but you're muted.
Oh, I'm sorry. At the mother house, do they recycle the plastic?
No.
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 no,
I mean, I thought they had mentioned it once, and I
Yes.
wasn't sure. You know, we'll
How do
have to see it. We'll have to see about that.
How do you recycle plastic?
Well, send it to the recyclers, not in the garbage. Is number one. There's plenty that can be made from plastic.
mhm.
You know.
Well, my understanding was the company that picks up our garbage recycles it. They pick out the plastic.
Oh, okay.
That
Okay.
was my understanding.
Okay.
But there's such a thing as ecological guilt. And I'm beginning to feel guilty because I just had blueberries for breakfast. But I have to say they were sweet. I don't know where they came from, but they were sweet and very delicious. And I know they're good for my brain. So in that respect. But I just want to say that I love living in a bioregion where we do have the change of seasons.
Mm.
I have to admit that winter is not my favorite season.
No.
And I was very upset when the groundhog did not see his shadow and it was going to for 6 more weeks of winter. But a friend of mine who knows that sent me a pot of Harry and David of bulbs, and they were tulip bulbs. So I had them in my room and I watched them grow from like 1/4 of an inch to 3 inches to 6 inches. And now they are in full bloom.
Wow.
It was so beautiful. They're red and pink and white. Since they were so beautiful and giving me such joy, I wanted to share it. So I put them down in the front lobby. So when people come in the front door, they can appreciate them. I can't tell you the smiles on people's faces to see that first sign of spring.
Mhm.
So, but it strikes me how the change of the seasons also is an analogy for me personally of my spiritual life. It seems that in winter I kind of go into a hibernation state, and looking forward to spring where I become spiritually alive, and then summer and fall, and with fall we have the letting go. So it's a very spiritual thing. And Don, where I was on the second floor, I used to wait for the sunrise, and I would see you out in the farm early in the morning. And you said to me that the farm is your cathedral. That's where you pray. It's your cathedral. And I'm finding as soon as spring comes, it's also my cathedral. I pray outdoors, and that's where I feel very close to God and to nature and to people. We're all connected. And I think that connection comes from our deep sense of the earth where we all came from, and that we will eventually go back to. And that cycle continues. The life continues. The life and death cycle of resurrection. Yeah.
So what a wonderful way maybe to bring our program to conclusion, huh? I want to thank you, Dawn, and thank all of you for your attention, for your participation in this program. And may we, Lent begins very soon.
Hmm.
And may this conversation help us to be mindful, really, about ways that we can be more caring for Earth and all creation. I know when I go to the store, I'm going to be very careful about picking up anything that's in a plastic container.
Or season.
It's hard to find anything not in a plastic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very hungry.
All right. Okay, so thank you so much.
Yeah.
Sorry I was late,
Donna.
but
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Don.
Thank
Dawn.
you.
thanks, Don.
Dawn.
Thank you.
Thank